In our Haftarah this week, the prophet Isaiah tells a story about an idolater. The idolater carefully selects cedar and oak trees to cut down. He divvies up the wood. Some is to warm himself, some for cooking fires, to bake bread and roast meat. He eats, he sits sated by the fire, and he says joyfully, "Ah, I am warm." The idolater appreciates how the wood meets his physical needs. So, with the remaining block, he carves an idol to which he bows and prays. And there is a kernel of childish logic here. The wood that keeps me fed and warm must be God. It is grimly utilitarian. God is only about material needs to the idolater, no ethical demands, no spiritual elevation. Isaiah, who prophesied in the 8th century BCE in the southern kingdom of Judah, is known as a champion for justice who often speaks angrily about idolatry. Typically, his anger is on moral grounds. Idolatry reduces faith to a quid pro quo and ignores the ethical demands of covenant. But in this particular passage, the prophet is incredulous about something else, the sheer stupidity of idolatry. Isaiah cries, "These idolaters have no intelligence or discernment. Their eyes and minds are smeared over, and they do not see or think. Nobody thinks. He feeds on ashes. A deluded mind turned him astray. He cannot save himself, yet he never says, 'Sheker, Bimini, the thing in my hand is a lie.'" The prophet wonders, how could someone believe that the product of his own hands is God? Where's the discernment? Where's the critical thinking? How can people be so credulous? Oh, Isaiah, you and me both. So often I read news or scroll social media and I think, this business venture is a pyramid scheme. This one is just gambling. This politician is lying through her teeth, and this one invokes long disproven conspiracies. People should see that Sheker Bimini, this thing in my hand, is a lie. I certainly relate to Isaiah's frustration. But with the experience of millennia between us, I can see that his approach did not work. Haranguing people for their ignorance, while perhaps tempting, does not change their minds. That is a theme of Nevi'im, our prophetic books. Our prophets decry sin and rail against injustice, and nobody listens to them. At the end of the day, almost all of our prophets are pretty ineffective. And perhaps that's why post-biblical Jewish tradition doesn't rely on prophets to correct public misconceptions. We don't expect God to send messengers to declare themselves and direct us to the truth. Instead, we developed a different strategy. We invested in education. At first, the Talmud established that a parent is obligated to teach their child Torah. A midrash explains that learning Torah begins with literacy. A parent begins to teach a child to read from the age of 5. But our sages realized that there was a problem. Bitchila mi sheyesh lo av melamdo Torah, mi she'ein lo av lo haya lamed Torah. At first, whoever had a father would have his father teach him Torah, but whoever did not have a father would not learn Torah. In other words, privatized education wasn't working. Some parents were unwilling or unable to teach their children. Some children had no parents. Therefore, the sages established teachers in schools in every town. Originally, the community schools began at age 16 or 17, but that didn't work. Teenagers with no prior formal education would argue with their teachers and storm out of the classroom. Eventually, Yehoshua ben Gamla instituted another ordinance. Every town must have a school for students starting at age 6 or 7. And Rava added that class sizes should be no greater than 25 students. Jewish law still obligates a parent to teach their children, but it also requires the community to educate its children. Education is so important in Judaism that there are multiple safety nets to ensure that no child falls through the cracks. Maimonides taught that any community that neglected its responsibility to set up schools should be excommunicated. Rav Hamnuna even speculated that God destroyed Jerusalem because the city did not meet its educational responsibilities. Young children were out on the streets instead of in school. Jewish tradition wants a literate and discerning polity. We do not consider education a privilege of the elite, but rather the birthright of every person and the firm ground on which to build a stable society. Our ancestors recognized what the US Supreme Court affirmed in its unanimous Brown v. Board of Ed decision, that public education is the very foundation of good citizenship. Education is an investment in a secure and productive society able to recognize falsehoods and fallacies. To that end, may our country affirm the shared goals of loving parents and dedicated educators, and commit in every generation and in every administration to education at all levels. Accessible early childhood education, well-funded and well-run public schools, colleges and universities that maintain academic independence. If universities falter, we should offer support, not accept their dismantlement. Though they are flawed, as all institutions are, our institutions of higher learning impart expertise, promote creative research, and foster probing scholarship. Our country needs them. Most of all, our schools need to nurture critical thinking. We want a public that can evaluate credibility, understand if a survey is conducted well, appreciate the discipline of the scientific method, identify an argument's implicit assumptions. We need readers. Reading books deepens our thinking and builds our concentration. Learning in general and reading in particular isn't just about stuffing our brains with bits of information, computer-like. Real learning strengthens our ability to reason, question, focus, make connections, and view our world and its problems from different perspectives. Education emphasizes how much we don't know. Learning simultaneously empowers and humbles us, and in that, learning is like standing before God. We are at once small before all that we cannot know, and stretching tall in our yearning to know more. If we meet Judaism's call for universal education, the reward is great. And if we ignore the call, the stakes are high. Lack of critical thinking ability means that people are susceptible to believing and spreading misinformation. We are vulnerable to propaganda, homegrown or directed from abroad. We are too often slow to realize that Sheker Bimini, this thing in my hand, is a lie. Wood is good for cooking, wood is good for warmth, but let's not end our search for truth satisfied that the wood must be God. May we keep searching for knowledge, and may we further Judaism's mission of building a more thoughtful, discerning, and critical world. Shabbat Shalom.